No mistake. I bought it. Your rent is due.
What kind of father are you? You can't even afford a house. The words, sharp and dripping with scorn, came from my own daughter, Emily. Her husband, Trevor, just snorted into his wine glass, a cruel smirk on his face. The dinner table fell into a stunned silence, but I just smiled, a tight, cold smile that didn't reach my eyes. They thought their words were daggers, and they were, but they were also a spark that ignited a fire I thought had died out long ago. I left that restaurant without another word, but with a plan already taking shape in my mind. 2 months later, I returned, not as their embarrassing, broke old dad, but as the new owner of their luxury apartment building. The rent had tripled. They thought they had destroyed me, but they had only shown me exactly where to strike back. Before we get into the whole story, if you enjoy tales of justice and seeing people get exactly what they deserve, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments what you would have done in my shoes. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to you. The restaurant hummed with the clatter of plates and the murmur of happy voices, but at our table, the air was thick, heavy like a storm about to break. Soft pendant lamps cast long shadows across the white tablecloth, and the rich scent of grilled steak hung in the air, though my own plate sat untouched. Across from me, Emily leaned forward. Her designer dress shimmered in the low light, her perfectly manicured nails tapping impatiently on the stem of her wine glass. Her husband, Trevor, lounged beside her, his expensive blazer unbuttoned, that arrogant smirk playing on his lips as he swirled his Merlot. "You're not eating, Dad," Emily said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "What's wrong? Can't afford the menu?" The conversation at the table, which was filled with cousins, an aunt, and a few of Trevor's smug business friends, died instantly. Someone coughed nervously. A fork scraped against a plate, the sound unnaturally loud in the sudden quiet. Trevor let out a loud, deliberate snort and poured himself more wine. "Maybe we should have picked a cheaper place," he added, not even bothering to look at me. "For Will's sake." I felt his words like a physical slap, but I didn't flinch. My hands rested on the table, the cool metal of the fork in my right hand grounding me. I squeezed it just enough to feel the tines bite into my palm. Emily's eyes, so much like her mother's, gleamed with a cruelty that felt new and yet somehow familiar. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a venomous hiss. "You've never been a real father, you know that? Just a burden, always scraping by, always embarrassing us." The room seemed to shrink. The clinking of glasses and distant laughter faded until all I could hear was the steady, heavy thumping of my own pulse in my ears. Trevor chuckled, muttering to the man next to him, "Poor old Will. Maybe a shelter's more his speed." A few nervous laughs rippled around the table, but no one dared to meet my eyes. I could have exploded. I could have shouted, reminding them how I'd paid for Emily's college, for her extravagant wedding, for the down payment on their damn apartment. I could have told them about all the dreams I had quietly packed away so that they could live theirs, so they could play at being successful on my dime. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled. It was a tight, controlled curve of my lips that felt more like a weapon than a gesture of warmth. "You done?" I asked, my voice low and steady. Emily rolled her eyes, tossing her long hair over her shoulder. "Oh, please, don't make a scene." Trevor raised his glass in a mocking toast. "To Will, the king of nothing." Then, to me, "Sit down. Don't ruin the night." My chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor as I stood up. The sound sliced through the restaurant's chatter, and a few heads turned our way. My old sweater suddenly felt heavy, but the weight of their scorn was heavier. I grabbed my worn jacket from the back of the chair, the rough fabric brushing against my knuckles, a stark reminder of who I was. I was not their punching bag. "Enjoy your dinner," I said, my eyes locking with Emily's for a fleeting moment. Hers were defiant, unyielding, with no trace of the little girl I once knew. Trevor just laughed, already turning back to charm the guest beside him. I walked out of that restaurant with measured steps, the warmth of the place giving way to the sharp bite of the October night. The heavy door swung shut behind me, muffling their laughter. My breath clouded in the cold air, and the streetlights flickered, casting long, distorted shadows on the wet pavement. Their words echoed in my head, each insult a spark, igniting an old, cold anger I'd buried for years. I didn't look back. My hands slipped into my pockets, my fingers brushing against my phone. A plan was already forming, hazy at first, but sharpening at the edges, like a blade being honed on a whetstone. They thought they knew me. They thought they'd broken me. They didn't know a damn thing. The streets of Columbus were quiet, the kind of quiet that presses down on your chest. My shoes crunched on stray autumn leaves, and the cold stung my face, but I barely noticed. The glow from a street lamp caught a puddle on the sidewalk, and I stopped, staring at my warped reflection in the oily water. Before I even realized what I was doing, my phone was in my hand, the screen lighting up my face with a photo of Emily. She was 6 years old in the picture, with a gappy-toothed grin, holding up a daisy she'd picked for me. My thumb hovered over the image, and the memories came rushing back, uninvited and unwelcome. 20 years ago, I was sitting in a bank, the air thick with the smell of ink and recycled air. The loan officer's pen scratched across the paper as I signed the loan that would become Emily's college fund. My tie felt too tight, and my shoulders ached from working a double shift at the construction site, but I'd smiled. She was going to be the first in our family to get a degree. I saw her future then, bright and limitless. I just didn't see what it would cost me. The memory shifted. 10 years ago, at Emily's wedding, the venue was a beautiful, expensive blur of white flowers and clinking champagne glasses. She glowed in her dress, a vision I'd paid for by emptying what was left of my savings. I had always wanted to travel, to see the Rockies, maybe even drive the Pacific Coast Highway. But that dream dissolved in the rustle of her silk veil. She'd hugged me that day, her perfume sharp and sweet, and whispered, "You're the best, Dad." I believed her then. 5 years ago, Trevor's first cafe. The place smelled of fresh coffee and his slick, overpowering ambition. He'd shaken my hand, his grip a little too tight, his promises a little too smooth. "This will change everything, Will. You'll see," he'd said. I handed over the last of my retirement fund to help him get it started. He called it a loan but never mentioned paying it back, not once. I blinked, and the dark street came back into focus. My house was just ahead, a small, shingled thing in a long row of identical homes. The porch light flickered as I climbed the steps, the key cold in my hand. Inside, the air was stale, and the old couch creaked under my weight. A framed photo of Emily sat on the bookshelf, her smile frozen in time. Next to it was a stack of old papers, bills, receipts, tangible reminders of everything I'd given up. I pulled a yellowed check from the pile. The ink was faded, but I could still read it. Payment for Emily's tuition, written in my own careful handwriting. My fingers tightened around it, crumpling the edges. She'd mostly stopped calling after the wedding. I'd get a generic card at Christmas, maybe. Trevor's cafe business thrived, but my name was never mentioned in the story they told their new, wealthy friends. The kitchen clock ticked, each second hammering away in the silence. I set the check down on the table, my hands steady now. The pain was still there, a dull, heavy ache in my chest, but something else was growing alongside it. Something hard and unyielding. I looked at Emily's photo again, at her bright eyes, full of the promise of a future that I had built for her. When I glanced at my own reflection in the dark window, my eyes looked different, colder. I wasn't their fool anymore. Tomorrow, things were going to change. Morning light sliced through the dusty blinds of my small home office, a cramped room that always smelled of old coffee and paperwork. Papers were strewn across the desk, old contracts, invoices, a lifetime of receipts. I sat with a mug of black coffee, the steam curling into the air, my notebook open to a fresh page. 2 names stared back at me. Emily, Trevor. My pen hovered over the page for a second, then pressed down hard, the ink bleeding slightly into the paper. I wasn't broke, not completely. Years as a construction manager had left me with a modest savings account and a few contacts who still owed me favors. But I had lived lean for so long, pouring everything I had into them. Emily's education, Trevor's business ventures, the down payment on their fancy apartment. My fingers tightened around the warm mug, the heat grounding me. No more. The phone rang, and my old friend Frank picked up on the first ring, his voice gravelly from years of cigars. "Will? It's early. You okay?" "I need some advice, Frank," I said, leaning back in my squeaky chair. "About Trevor's business." There was a pause on the other end. "You sure about this? Stirring up trouble with your daughter's husband? That's a deep cut." They stirred first. My voice was flat, but my pulse was hammering. "What do you know about his cafes?" Frank sighed, a sound like sandpaper. "He's leveraged to the hilt. All smoke and mirrors. He's got loans, made some bad deals. Word on the street is he's missed a few payments." He paused again. You thinking what I think you are? Maybe. I jotted down a note. Debts. Lenders. Who does he owe? Start with Midland Bank. There's a guy there, Tom Reed. He might talk to you. But Will, this could burn the bridge with Emily for good. Let it burn, I said, and hung up. My eyes were fixed on the notebook. The plan was taking shape, rough but real. I opened my laptop, its glow harsh in the dim room. Emily's social media was a parade of curated excess. Vacations I knew they couldn't afford, designer bags, and captions about living the dream. Trevor's posts were even worse. Pictures of him in a tailored suit, toasting the opening of his latest cafe. I scrolled through their feed, my jaw tight with a cold fury. They had built their fragile empire on my sacrifices, and then they had the audacity to laugh in my face. A call to another old client, someone in the restaurant supply business, confirmed what Frank had hinted at. Trevor's cafes were bleeding cash. One bad month, one big unexpected bill, and the whole house of cards would come tumbling down. I wrote another note. Buy the debt. It was risky, but I still had enough pull with the right people to make it work. The small office felt like it was closing in on me, but not with pressure, with possibility. I stood up and started pacing, the old floorboards creaking under my work boots. My sleeves were rolled up, my coffee had gone cold. Each step felt like a decision. Each note in my book was a weapon. They had underestimated me. They thought I was a quiet old man who would just fade away. They were wrong. I grabbed my coat and the notebook, its pages now heavy with intent. The bank was a short drive away, and Tom Reed owed me a favor from way back. I stepped outside into the sharp morning air as the city woke up around me. My strides were long and purposeful. I knew exactly where to hit them, how to dismantle their world brick by brick, and I wasn't going to wait another minute. Inside the bank, the air smelled of polished wood and money. Janet, an old colleague from my construction days, sat behind a desk, her glasses perched on her nose. She smiled when she saw me, but her eyes narrowed, sensing I wasn't there for a friendly chat. Will Cunningham, she said, leaning back. What brings you to my corner of the world? Information, I said, sliding into the chair across from her. My voice was calm, but my fingers tapped the notebook in my pocket. About Trevor Jones. His cafes. Janet raised an eyebrow, her nails clicking as she typed on her keyboard. Not one for small talk anymore, are you? Her face was grim as she looked at the screen. Trevor's in deep. 3 of his cafes are seriously behind on payments. The bank is ready to call in the loans. She paused, her eyes meeting mine. And Emily, she's got her own mess. Took out a big loan for that online boutique of hers. She's barely covering the interest. I nodded, jotting another note. Debts. Vulnerable. How bad is it? Bad enough, Janet said, leaning closer and lowering her voice. Trevor's juggling creditors like a circus act. Emily's worse. She's burning through cash on inventory she can't move. She looked at me intently. Why the sudden interest, Will? This is about family, isn't it? I gave her a thin, sharp smile. Just curious. Thanks, Janet. I stood, my chair scraping softly on the polished floor. She didn't press, but her eyes followed me as I walked out. Next stop, Trevor's flagship cafe downtown. I pushed through the glass door, a little bell jangling overhead. The place smelled of burnt coffee and neglect. Half the tables were empty, and the few staff members on duty looked listless and bored. A cracked sign above the counter read, Jones Java. I could hear Trevor in the back office, his voice sharp and panicked as he argued on the phone. You can't cut me off now. I'll have the money, I swear. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair a mess. I ordered a black coffee, paid with cash, and sat near the window, completely unnoticed. The coffee was cold by the time I left, but my notebook was heavier, empty seats, angry suppliers. Back at home, the glow of my laptop screen lit the dim kitchen. Emily's social media was still a gallery of manufactured success. A new photo showed her in a silk scarf on a yacht, a new leather bag slung over her shoulder. The captions screamed success, but the comments told a different story. Where's my order? It's been 3 weeks. Her boutique is a scam, don't buy from her. Her business was crumbling under a mountain of customer complaints. I wrote one word in my notebook: vanity. That was her weakness. The clock ticked past midnight. I leaned back in my chair, the old wood creaking in protest. Their pride was my opening. Their debts were my leverage. I pulled out my phone and dialed an old partner, a man who knew how to move money quietly and without leaving a trail. The line rang as a light rain began to patter against the window, each drop a promise of the storm that was coming for them. I signed the papers in an office of glass and steel, the air heavy with the scent of leather and ink. And just like that, Trevor's debts became mine. The investor, a bald man named Kessler, slid the contract back across the polished desk. "Done," he said, his voice clipped and efficient. "You sure about this, Cunningham? It's a risky play." I met his gaze, my expression unyielding. "It's just the start." I folded the agreement, tucking it into the inside pocket of my coat. Below us, the Columbus skyline was a sharp silhouette against the dusky sky. I left without another word. The move was clean, hidden behind a shell company I'd set up with Kessler's help. Trevor would never see my name. He would only see the official letter that arrived the next day. Payment due in full, 30 days. I could almost picture him opening it, his hands shaking, his slick charm utterly useless against the cold black ink. By noon the next day, I was parked across the street from his cafe, the same one I'd scouted before. A sign that read "Closed for technical difficulties" hung crookedly on the door. Through the window I could see Trevor pacing back and forth, yelling into his phone. A delivery truck pulled away from the curb, its cargo bay empty. I allowed myself a small, grim smile. Back at home, I spread the documents across my kitchen table, the lamp casting a harsh glow on the numbers. The figures were clear. Trevor's business was bleeding out, and my purchase of his debt gave me the scalpel. I could demand immediate repayment, knowing he couldn't deliver. The letter, now in his hands, was my first move, a quiet, precise cut. I leaned back, the chair groaning under my weight. Emily's face flashed in my mind, her smiling face from that old photo. Was I going too far? She had stood by Trevor, had laughed as they humiliated me, but she was still my daughter. The thought was a heavy weight in my chest, but I pushed it aside. This wasn't about her. Not yet. This was about justice. The phone rang, the screen lighting up with an unknown number. I let it ring twice, then picked up, my voice steady. "Yes?" "It's Jones," Trevor snapped, his words rushed and frantic. "This creditor nonsense. Who's behind it?" "You know something, don't you, Will?" His panic was almost sweet, a satisfying crack in his polished facade. I leaned against the counter, picturing the letter in his hand. "Sounds like you're in trouble, Trevor. Maybe you should have been more careful with your money." I let the words hang in the air, my tone calm, almost amused. He cursed, demanding answers I had no intention of giving. I hung up, my pulse steady and even. The rain outside had stopped, leaving only the sound of the dripping faucet in the quiet kitchen. I set my phone down and felt the immense weight of what I had started. The first domino had fallen. The knock on my door was sharp, insistent. I knew who it was before I even opened it. Emily stormed in, her designer coat flapping behind her like a battle standard. Trevor followed, his jaw tight, reeking of cigarettes and desperation. The air in my small apartment instantly grew heavy with their anger. Emily's eyes were red-rimmed, her voice ablade. "You're pathetic, Dad. Stirring up trouble just because you're jealous of us. You think you can ruin our lives?" I stood by my kitchen table, my hands tucked into my pockets, my face a carefully constructed mask of indifference. "I haven't done anything," I said, my tone perfectly even. "Sounds to me like you're the ones digging your own graves." Trevor started pacing, his fists clenched, his expensive blazer hopelessly wrinkled. "Don't play innocent, old man," he growled. "You've been whining to someone. Banks, creditors, who knows, you're trying to sink me." His voice cracked on the last word, betraying the raw fear beneath his bravado. Emily spun toward me, her heels clicking angrily on the old wood floor. "You've always hated our success," she spat. "Living in this dump, clinging to your sad little life. You're nothing, and you can't stand that we're everything you'll never be." Her words were meant to cut, but I'd already heard worse from her in that restaurant. I was inoculated against her venom now. I took a step closer, my eyes locked on hers. "You built your lives on my back," I said, my voice low and steady. "And now you're surprised when the ground starts to shake." Emily let out a sharp, bitter laugh and threw her purse onto my couch. "You're delusional. Keep your little conspiracies, Dad. You'll regret this." She turned to Trevor, who slammed his hand against the wall. The sound was like a gunshot in the small room. "Back off, Will," he said, pointing a trembling finger at me. "Or you'll wish you had." His threat was hollow, and we both knew it. I didn't move, didn't even blink. "Careful, Trevor," I said softly. "You're not in control anymore." The words landed like stones, His face twitched. Emily grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the door. She paused in the doorway to glare back at me one last time, then slammed the door shut. The frame rattled, the sound lingering in the air like a warning. Alone again, I let out a long breath. My heart was steady, but my mind was racing. Their fear was real now. Their cracks were exposed. I crossed to the table and opened my notebook, the pages worn from constant use. My pen scratched across the paper as I wrote, each word a step deeper into my plan. Outside, the city lights flickered through the window, pulsing like a distant heartbeat. The next move was the big one. I had to acquire the building they lived in, their sanctuary. I picked up the phone and dialed Ron, an old partner who knew the real estate world inside and out. It was time to take away the very roof over their heads. I made the call. "The building at 14th and High," I told Ron. "I want it." Quietly, through a shell company. There was a long pause. "That's a big ask, Will. Expensive, too. You sure you've got the capital?" "Make it happen, Ron. I'll cover it." The deal was in motion. That evening, I walked to their building, a sleek tower of glass and steel in the heart of Columbus. The lobby gleamed with polished marble, but I noticed a fine crack snaking across one of the large wall panels, a flaw they'd never see. I told the doorman I was there to check on the utilities, an old trick from my construction days. He just waved me through. From the street, I could see their apartment, the corner unit on the 3rd floor. I saw Emily's silhouette moving behind the curtains, her gestures sharp and angry as she argued with Trevor. I turned away, my breath clouding in the chilly air. Back home, I paused at the bookshelf. The photo of 6-year-old Emily seemed to mock me with its innocence. Was this too far? My chest tightened. She'd laughed as they tore me down, but she was still my daughter. I set the photo face down on the shelf. The dull ache in my chest faded, replaced by the cold weight of what they had done. The pieces were now moving at speed. A letter landed on their doormat, informing them that their rent was tripling, effective immediately. I had also hired a marketing expert, a quiet deal to aggressively boost a rival online boutique. Emily's store, already struggling, was now bleeding customers. Her social media was a war zone of complaints, late orders, no refunds. Her carefully constructed empire of silk and selfies was crumbling. I stood across the street from their building, leaning against a cold street lamp. Through their large window, I could see the chaos. Emily was pacing, her hands flailing in desperation. Trevor was slumped on the couch, a cigarette burning forgotten in his hand. The rent increase letter, torn in half, lay on the coffee table. Suddenly, Emily's phone sailed across the room, shattering against the wall. I exhaled, a plume of white in the cold air. Her control was gone, just as I had planned. The phone rang later that night, shattering the silence in my kitchen. Trevor's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring twice before answering, my voice smooth as glass. "What is it?" "We need to talk," he said, his words slurred and desperate. "Tomorrow. Your place. Name the time." He was breaking, and he didn't even know I was the one holding the hammer. I leaned back, my chair creaking. 8. Don't be late. I hung up. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, a fitting soundtrack for what was to come. The storm was here, and they were caught directly in its path. First, we met at his cafe, or what was left of it. The place was a shell, its tables bare, the air thick with the smell of bleach and defeat. Trevor sat at the counter, his blazer crumpled, a stack of unpaid bills beside him. The keys to the place glinted under the harsh fluorescent lights, a symbol of everything he'd lost. He looked up as I entered, his eyes bloodshot. "Will," he said, his voice unsteady. "You got to help me. Talk to these people. Tell them I'm good for it." I crossed my arms, leaning against a dusty table. "You dug this hole, Trevor, not me. Why should I clean up your mess?" He slammed a fist on the counter, the keys rattling. "Because you're family. You owe us." His desperation was pathetic. His charm was gone. "You owe me," I said, my voice low and cold. "Everything you have, your cafes, your life. It was all built on what I gave you." I stepped closer, my shadow falling over him, and you threw it all back in my face. The door swung open, and a supplier started hauling out the last espresso machine. Trevor didn't even look. His shoulders slumped in total surrender. "Just talk to them," he muttered, tossing the keys onto the counter. They landed with a final metallic clink. I left without another word. Later that night, the lawyer's letter arrived. I tore it open. The words were simple and clear. Property transfer complete. Lightning flashed, illuminating the room for a split second. Tomorrow, they would face the truth, and I would be the one to deliver it. My coat was still damp from the storm as I left my apartment, the documents tucked safely in my inside pocket. Each page felt like a blade honed for this exact moment. The elevator in their building hummed as it carried me to their floor. The mirror reflected my face, calm, resolute, unyielding. Their front door was ajar, and I could hear their frantic, sharp voices spilling out into the hallway. I knocked once, hard. The voices stopped. Trevor yanked the door open, his shirt untucked, his eyes wild. "Will, what the hell are you doing here?" I stepped past him without waiting for an invitation. The apartment was a wreck. Half-packed boxes were everywhere. Wine glasses littered the tables, and the torn notice about the tripled rent was pinned to a newspaper. Emily stood by the window, her hair a mess, her silk blouse stained with tears. "Dad," she whispered, her voice as small as a child's. I set the documents on the coffee table. The thud was loud in the tense silence. "Read it," I said, my tone flat. Emily reached for the papers, her hands trembling. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she scanned the pages. Trevor leaned over her shoulder, his breath ragged, his face draining of all color. You own the building." Emily's voice cracked, her gaze darting from the papers to my face. "This is a mistake. It has to be." "No mistake," I said, crossing my arms. "I bought it. Your rent is due. All of it. Now." Trevor lunged toward me, his fists clenched. "You can't do this. We'll fight it, you hear me?" But his voice faltered, his bravado crumbling into ash. He knew he had nothing left. No cafes, no leverage, no charm to save him now. Emily sank onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. "Dad, please," she choked out between sobs. "I didn't mean it. Those things I said at the restaurant. Remember when you taught me to ride a bike? You were my hero." Her tears fell, but they didn't reach me. "Not anymore." "You called me nothing," I said, my voice low and steady. "You both did. You built your lives on what I gave you, then you spat in my face." I gestured to the documents on the table. "This is what you chose." Trevor grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly weak. "We'll fix it, Will. Give us time. We'll pay you back, I swear." His eyes were begging, but all I could see was the man who had mocked me, who had laughed as my own daughter humiliated me. I pulled my arm free. "You're out of time." I turned and walked to the door, their pleas following me like faint echoes. Outside, the wind howled, tugging at my coat. The revenge was complete. It was cold and final, but it didn't feel like a victory. It just felt finished. Now, something new had to begin. I sank into the chair at my kitchen table, the scent of fresh coffee curling from the mug in my hands. The storm had passed, leaving a profound quiet that settled deep in my bones. For the first time in years, I felt still, like a river that had finally found its course after a long and turbulent journey. My notebook lay open, and I wrote, "Fund for the sacrificed, for those who gave everything and were forgotten." The words felt right, a purpose born from pain. The next day, I walked into a small office I'd rented downtown. The air smelled of fresh paint and possibility. A consultant named Sarah sat across from me, her laptop open. "Your fund is viable," she said, sliding a budget across the desk. "We can launch within a month." I nodded and signed the first forms, my hand steady. The act felt like planting a seed, something that would grow far beyond me and my own story. That evening, I wandered through a park near my house. The air was crisp, and leaves crunched under my boots. Children laughed on a playground, their parents watching with quiet pride. I stopped, my breath catching in my chest. My fund would matter. It would help someone's father, someone's mother, someone's sacrifice. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about redemption. When I got home, there was a single envelope in the mailbox. Emily's handwriting scrolled across the front. My fingers traced the ink, but I didn't open it. Later, a neighbor, Tom, caught me outside. "Saw Emily and Trevor," he said, shaking his head. "Moved to a cramped little place across town. No more fancy cars. Trevor's pushing papers in some office, and Emily shut down her shop. They looked broken, both of them." I just nodded, my face blank, but the news settled inside me like a stone. Justice, cold and final. At home, I finally slid the letter open. It was filled with apologies, with desperate memories of me braiding her hair, with promises to change. "I'm sorry, Dad," she wrote. "I didn't see you. Please, let's just talk." Her handwriting trembled, but the words didn't move me. I had heard her laughter in that restaurant, felt the sting of her scorn. That person was gone. I folded the letter and tucked it into a drawer with old photos and faded checks. That chapter of my life was closed. The next morning, I stood in a bright community center, the air warm with the scent of coffee and new beginnings. It was the first meeting for my fund. Dozens of faces, some weary, some hopeful, looked back at me. I stepped up to the podium, my voice clear and strong. "This is for the overlooked," I said, my eyes sweeping the room. "For those who gave their all and were pushed aside. We see you. We're here for you." The applause started soft, then grew into a roar that I felt deep in my chest. A purpose, a legacy. I left the center as dusk fell, the city alive with the sounds of life. The street stretched before me, lined with trees bare against the winter sky. I walked with my hands in my pockets, a small smile tugging at my lips. Emily and Trevor were out there somewhere, rebuilding their lives or breaking apart completely, but their story was no longer tangled up with mine. Their future was their own to carry. The wind picked up, cool against my face, and I tilted my head back to look at the sky. The stars were faint, but they were there, steady and constant above the city's glow. My steps echoed on the pavement, each one a note in a song I was finally writing for myself. And for the first time in a very long time, it was a song of peace. Sometimes, the deepest wounds are inflicted by those we love the most. But true strength isn't just about enduring the pain, or even about seeking revenge. It's about taking the broken pieces of your life and building something new. Something that not only heals you but also offers a light to others who are lost in the same darkness. You can't change the past, but you can refuse to let it define your future. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more content, and I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for listening.